wintry, walking, talking, thinking. Flip my phone over to see if maybe that isn't so noisy in the steps in the snow. Think with me on this one. Here's what I'm thinking about. I just posted today an article where I live in Canada. Corrections Canada is just, I think it's Corrections Canada. I'll post a link to the article in the comments. Just announced they're going to put in a self-identifying Indigenous person or Indigenous-focused individual into their executive structure. And that's based on some recommendations that have been done in that area. And it's a good step. That I look at it, and that's not a structural change. That's a structural add-on. And I've said this in a few videos and posts, continue to say it. Structural issues like systemic racism and sexism and ageism, those require structural remedies. And I've seen this in a lot of organizations, and it's a positive step. It's just not a structural one. It's an add-on. So one could say, oh, well, that's structural, but it's not an overall structural change. If you add a self-identifying Indigenous individual, or in your equity, diversity, and inclusion work, you hire somebody from marginalized identity to run that office. And even more so, if those offices, equity, diversity, inclusion, Indigenous office, if they're responsible for all the training that then rolls out in an organization, are they training the executive and the leadership? Because in higher education in Canada and universities, 90% of that executive leadership is white, and it's a significant overrepresentation, and the majority are male, especially in those significant roles like the president. About 70% are male, the vice president academic or the provost, vice president of research, pretty significant executive positions. And if some position is created like a Indigenous VP or an equity, diversity, and inclusion or a human rights VP, and they're from a marginalized identity, they're just a one across from another VP, and they're still below the president or the CEO in an organization. So that's not structural change. That's just moving some blocks around it. It's important, but it's most likely not going to result in a whole lot of change, especially if that VP of equity or VP of Indigenous office or whatever it may be has to do the training, because they're still going to have in the hierarchy, especially of higher education in the public sector, a president or a CEO that they most likely report to in one form or another, does their performance reviews, is responsible for a variety of things. They're going to end out still having to report into that hierarchical structure, and that's still a problem. What if you did it from outside, or created a certain amount of committee that didn't report into the president, that reported into the board or some other structure in the public sector? So these add-on positions are important. It's a change, but if you still got 90% of folks in senior leadership positions are identify as white and a large portion are male, there's still going to be a lot of confirmation bias and otherwise. That's just some things I'm thinking about as I'm walking on a wintry day. Snow came, we got hit by the atmospheric frosty. What do you think about that? Thoughts or comments? Really appreciating the folks that are reaching out with direct messages. I can certainly appreciate some folks are not all that comfortable leaving comments if they, in their profile, suggest they have a certain employer in a certain sector. So send a direct message if that works. Always interested to learn more.